Hi, everybody. Welcome to Down Syndrome 21st Perspectives. I'm Lee Ferlisi, one of your co-hosts. This is Monique Johnson and my other fantastic co-host, Ann Lewis. And today we have with us Charmaine Thaner. She's a special education advocate with 30 years of classroom experience, 15 years of special education experience, and she's the parent of an adult son with Down syndrome named Dylan. So she is here to tell us about this strategy she put together to make sure that your kids have an IEP that actually fits your child. So you're going to want to hear what she has to say today. Charmaine, thanks and welcome to our podcast.
Glad to be here. Thank you.
So you have a great tip for parents. Can you tell us one of the best things they can do for their kid as they're looking through the IEP they get back from the school?
I believe in color coding. It really helps me. So when you look at your child's IEP, and you can do this on a paper copy, you can do it on your computer. But when I first read an IEP, I'm looking for the child's strengths. And when I see strengths, I highlight that in green. And green is go. We want to go with those strengths, right? That's what we want to remember. And I also look for parent and student input. And I highlight that in blue. And then as I'm reading it, when I see needs, I highlight that in pink for stop. We got to think about this. Well, guess which color I usually see when I read IEPs?
Pink.
Pink, pink, pink.
Pink.
Pretty and pink.
Pink. Why is that?
Yeah.
Why is it?
Yeah. So that's an easy, concrete way you can look at your IEP and say, you know what? My goal this year is we're going to see more green in my child's IEP. And we're going to build on those strengths.
And do you feel like the strengths aren't recognized enough? Or do you feel like that's just a more solid way for teachers to grab a hold of what the kid can do and build?
I think sometimes we nod our head and say, well, that's great to know. Like, you know, Mario is great at karate, and everybody will like nod their head and like go on. Yeah. And it's like, no, if we know this kid is great at karate, how is that going to help us plan and build on these new skills? You know, if he doesn't have many friends, if he doesn't see himself in a leadership role, how about if during a PE class, he led the class and he showed him some karate moves, you know? And it's like, how can we? So what I see is we don't connect the dots between what the kid's strength is and how that helps us as a teacher.
Yeah.
So now, Charmaine, you've been in 3 roles as a teacher, a special ed teacher, and an advocate.
And a parent.
Well, yes. And yeah. But where do we go? How do we actually get it to happen for that child if they really do need more help or more one-on-one? How do we get them those friendships? How do we get them the learning that they need, conversation skills to build if this poor teacher is stretched in so many different directions?
That's a common request of parents is more one-on-one adult help for their child. And so what I try to do is let's look at the big picture here. So when during the school day does your child need additional one-on-one support from an adult? And sometimes what we find out is the parent is most worried about recess. You know, falling off the slide, you know, the fence doesn't go all the way around, or the gate's too easy to get open, you know, so like, so then it's not like I want my kid to have a one-on-one parent the whole school day.
Right.
It's like I want extra eyes when he is outside on that playground. And that changes the conversation. So instead of saying I want it all day, let's really look at it.
That's a great bit of advice.
Yeah, like
we have
where
not
is
heard
it
that one.
most needed?
Yes.
Yeah, like
that
how
makes a
can
lot
we?
of sense.
Where would this child benefit from having the support, and when?
Yeah.
What are some of the things that you see in the IEPs that look good on paper but don't actually pan out?
So one good example is the student had a communication device. And in the accommodations, it said that the student must have access to his communication device. So we're talking at the meeting and we're saying, so how's it going with the communication device? And the teacher goes, he just never wants to use it. And we're surprised, And she goes, he knows it's in the closet and he can get it when he wants. And he never gets it. And it was so access to something is that's, or as necessary. And it's well, he gets to decide if it's necessary or not. So those vague words are things that you can really key in on. Read the accommodations to a friend and have your friends say, is there a loophole around here?
Well, and I also think, to your point about that, in my own personal experience, I think, as you said, paying close attention to the words that are in the IEP, but also to the parent is really the advocate, right? Is the person who's sitting at the table. I've seen that happen with Marley, in my own experience. Just being able to say, well, you know what? It says that you're going to be offering X amount of occupational therapy 2 times per week. Tell me what's been happening during that time, right?
Yeah.
And not always, even as the parent, it's a lot of information, right?
Right.
So you're looking at it and you're saying, okay, but also I took on the position of, okay, like most, which I would highly encourage most parents to do, to just know that you're the best person to speak up for your child, period. You're the one that's going to tell them what your child needs and then advocate and try to get the school system to give you what you need. And then if they don't, then you might have to go somewhere else to get it.
Fritz, his teacher got him to read. That was my goal. Yeah. He's 6. She sends me things that he's doing, and I write back I don't know who I'm more proud of, my kid or you.
The teacher, right.
Because Fritz takes a lot of coaxing. I mean, a lot of he takes a lot.
He's getting it though from her.
I got spoiled with the other 3. Yeah. Fritz is a lot. Yeah. And so does it work? Does it work for our children in terms of learning? Yes. I'm not worried about that is all safety stuff. But when a child needs to learn to read or needs to do math, how is that actually getting done in a public school setting?
Right. I love that because that's the position I was in after 15 years of being a special ed teacher. I said, I sit through these meetings and I give general ed teachers ideas like, try this, or if you do this. And I thought, Charmaine, you've never been a teacher with 29 kids in the class to do this. It's how do you know? Yeah. So that was my motivation. I thought I'll go to the classroom for a few years, make sure inclusion works, and then I'll come back to special ed. Well, I love that community that you have in a general ed classroom, this little group of kids.
Right.
And it is possible. It's possible. It's possible. And if it was possible for me, 30 years ago in a little mountain town in Colorado, it's possible for...
When you say possible, do you mean it's possible to get that child to read and to do the things the other kids are?
Yeah. Like Dylan, our son, has always been included. And he's not a high reader, high grade level, but he learned. We found, different ways addition, the fun way is from a group of retired teachers in Utah. But anyway, we found different ways, and we had wonderful teachers that also were on board, But and as a teacher myself, I had kids with pretty complex needs, and it's it is, and it's not like we always want necessarily a para in there. If there's co-teaching going on, that's a way to add another person. Natural peer support is really underused, and it's not making his classmates, his teacher or something, but it's a kid next to him goes, oh, touches his reading book, and it's oh, that's the cue. I got to pick up my book here, So there's
peer support.
Yeah, that peer support is amazing.
It's huge.
But you have to have training for staff.
I know that you do your work online and you hold your seminars with people everywhere. So do you find that there's a certain state that has like a really good, strong inclusion?
Yeah, right.
I know. That's always the $1 million question.
Yeah, exactly. The $1 million
Right,
question.
right.
And it's ever evolving.
Well,
right?
we just had a school that my friends are there, and they absolutely rave about their special ed teacher.
Yes.
And everything was great. The principal was on board. She was wonderful. They were giving her resources. And then a new principal came in and started giving this amazing special ed teacher horrible reviews. And they just couldn't understand. And they think it's because
terrible.
then
That
they'll have
happens.
justification to not give the funding. And is that really happening? Is
It
that
happens.
going on everywhere?
Happens all the time. I mean, well, I shouldn't say
But
all the
once you lose
time.
your
But it happens,
principal,
right?
you could get so excited about a
Yes.
school,
Right.
and then you lose your principal, and then it all changes.
It can
Well,
be so different.
Well, and I'll say this, and you and I have talked about this, that, my experience was that, principles change, right? And then the whole structure, right? Paras leave. Paras are in the classroom and then they're no longer there. And I think one of the things that we all know is that for any child, but even more specifically for children with special needs, consistency is very
I was just going
important.
to say, they get attached.
Consistency is very important. So, I've been praying. I'm like, okay, Lord, just let Marley's teacher stay until he graduates.
Yeah.
You
And
got
he's
one
at
more, one more month.
Oh, that's why it's hard to say this state is best. I mean, I just saw a report came out that Oklahoma was in, I think, the top 3 or 5 or something. And I've been hearing from lots of parents in Oklahoma, and they're like, what?
I know.
Yeah, but, so it's just hard to judge that.
They
But yeah.
New York, New Jersey, and the East Coast
Pennsylvania.
states that they're all really good. And I go back there all summer, and they're like, yeah, no.
But it's sad after 50 years of having a law that we're still doing so many baby steps or taking steps backwards. I mean, Dylan was born in 1988. He was included all the way through school.
That's amazing.
He attended college for 4 years at the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs,
Wonderful.
before they had any kind of Think College program. And that was his transition plan. The district paid for his, they, had a van, took him down to the university. He had a para that helped at the beginning of each semester for him to figure out on campus where everything was. And then she was really needed more for the college professors at Dillon, because the professors were like, I don't know what to expect. How do I do this?
Sure.
But anyway, that was his transition plan. So there's always more than what the district offers you.
But parents that aren't able to fight, they're just
Maybe they're
They're just
reluctant.
nervous to
They're
fight, or
reluctant.
they're afraid it's gonna. Sometimes you might even just be afraid if you're like that, then they're not gonna like your child when you're at school because of the way you act. So it's a dance between how much you want to push and fight versus bring brownies to all the meetings.
Well, you know what I would say?
What?
I would say, know your parent rights.
I know.
Right. So,
but-
I mean, I think really because if you know your parent rights, I'm not saying that that's going to make everything easy, but what I am saying is think about it. If you know what your rights are, you're more inclined to be like, okay, I'm confident enough to sit at the table.
Yeah.
Yep.
Right?
Sure.
I have a place at the table. That doesn't mean that you're going to get everything that you want.
Right.
It doesn't mean that everything's going to turn out the way you expect it to. And, I've had that experience having a 19-year-old. I'm
Right.
sure you've
Yeah.
had that experience, Dylan. And, with Fritz, he's 6 and he's not in, this traditional setting. But I think that's what I would say to parents, recognize knowing your rights, right? And those things do change. Right?
Yes. So to keep track of it.
So just know that, show up, ask questions, and be willing to just say, hey, I don't understand this. Can you explain it to me?
What do you tell your clients, Charmaine?
Well, it depends on the family. I've worked with some families that their culture is you don't question.
Okay, that too.
People are
It's like these are teachers. They went to college. It's not my place to question them. And so then you have to really honor their culture And then as an advocate beside them, I can, kind of be the one that would ask more questions at the meeting or bring something up. Because some parents are just very, very quiet. And they, without having, and it can be your friend to come with them, it doesn't have to be an advocate, but, they leave the meeting and they've hardly said a word.
Yeah.
And they get the IEP home. And if English is their second language,
We're just going to say the language.
it's like, how do I, for us to read it in English, it's hard.
Right.
So there's all those things that sometimes, and especially I sometimes hear teachers say, I try to reach out to parents, they don't respond. And I'm like, well, then we have to figure out another way to communicate.
It's a village.
Yeah. Are there other tips that you have? Like, I love the color coding one, and I love that idea of asking when during a day. I mean, just one keyword, right?
Like
when,
give me a specific, right?
Yes, yes. Just so that, if they get specific on what their child needs when, could be super helpful. Is there anything else in your bag of tricks there that might be good for our listeners to know?
I think the other area of the IEP that gets forgotten a lot is the optional statement of service delivery. And so usually that's under the table or the chart that has, how many minutes of OT, who's going to do, where's going to happen. And under there's usually a paragraph that says optional statement of service delivery. And the purpose of that section in the IEP is for everybody to walk away with a good picture of who's doing what, when, and what it's really going to look like. So it's one thing to say, he's going to get pair support during science class, and you can see how many minutes, but it's like, but what does that look like? Tell me, is that the para sitting next to him during lab, or is the para walking around and helping other, you really want to walk away from that meeting having a picture of what your kid's day looks like.
Really good point.
And that's where it can really have that description. And it helps other people, because it's like, the OT is going to do so many minutes for fine motor, but then we're going to remember when he's in general ed, we're going to remember those fine motor skills that OT is working on and make sure we use them in the classroom.
What are some things that you have said or done to make a real change, like a real lasting change for the child?
That's a great question.
Have other kids come to the meeting.
Other children, other people.
Interesting.
Have other students.
I love that.
So I don't know if you know about person-centered planning.
Yes.
So when Dylan was in 5th grade, he had a MAPS, which is a person-centered planning. Dylan's the, key person. And we were doing it then because of the transition to middle school. And I'm a trained facilitator, but, I had somebody else facilitate. But my rule is that there always has to be more students than adults in the room.
Okay. And so how does that help? Do the kids chime in and talk? Wow. That's amazing.
And do all IEP
I
meetings
love
have
it.
this? Or?
This is not something I do at IEP meetings. This is something that I do with a person-centered planning.
Okay.
However, at IEP meetings, I would have like a couple of Dylan's friends come. And and it's like they have the best ideas. I mean, we're sitting there, the adults, and the kids are saying, well, when Dylan does that, I just say, knock it off. And he stops. And we're like, how do we do this behavior plan? And how do we track? And it's like, no.
Well, you make the kids,
Okay.
So in Utah, at Park City, a kid would take it as an elective to be this child's buddy in each class. So, the child that Fritz would have a different buddy in each thing depending on what kid was in that class, but he's getting credit for it. So instead of having a para be assigned, it's a child, a peer, and they're getting benefit by helping somebody and serving somebody, and Fritz is getting the benefit by having someone that's cool. So I just, it would just be so nice if other schools would recognize that our children's presence is a gift and not a burden.
Yeah.
Because it's a gift on the other people that get to give.
Yes.
The kids.
Yes.
And I love that answer about making the kids help. And that just reminded me of that program. And can you talk a little bit about your services and how they could use
So you can follow my Facebook page. It's called The Art of Advocacy.
Okay.
And I do usually twice a month. I'll do a Facebook Live there with some topic. The beginning of May, I'm going to do some specific, training for parents about this whole connecting the dots framework.
And if I get your email.
Yeah. So if you go to IEP.today/advocate, or I'm sorry, advocate, then you can sign up for the newsletter.
Okay.
And what I've started doing in the newsletter is there's usually tips on the topic for the month, but then I've also started doing AI tips because I'm helping parents use AI in their advocacy.
Great.
So now
Wonderful.
just watching older kids with Down syndrome since I've had Fritz as a baby always is what gave me hope and it pushed me to realize that he can learn, he can do so much. So tell us a little bit about Dylan.
So he is 37 years old now.
Wow.
So, oh my gosh. So
Amazing.
like I had mentioned earlier, what he did is he audited classes for 4 years at the University of Colorado in Colorado Springs. And that was a wonderful experience for him. And he got to take a variety of classes like ancient history because he loves learning about Egypt.
So neat.
And then photography. And, he got to take, just a variety of classes. It wasn't like, this is my major, it was like things that he loved. So that was like a wonderful opportunity for him. And, he's had different jobs. So like when he was in high school, the summer before he was a senior, he worked at Wendy's, which, wasn't his favorite job because he had to clean the tables. But it's like a lot of kids have summer jobs.
Right?
Yes. And the whole idea of like people seeing him and people seeing that he's capable in doing, And then for like 5 years, he worked at our local grocery store, which he loved because he loves talking to everybody and everybody does. He knows everybody. So he's done a variety of things like that. And then we moved to Idaho in 2013 and he rents a house. He has a roommate. They split the rent, split the utilities. There is staff that is there to support them. And he moved back in a couple of months during COVID because I was really nervous about, COVID.
Yeah.
But he loves being independent. And then in Idaho, he got a job at Red Robin restaurant. I don't know if you guys have this.
Yeah.
And so he started out doing a variety of things. And then he had a job coach that like mapped out the tables and the numbers in the restaurant. And he became a host and he did so remembering table 9 is here and table 20 is over here. So, he's had a variety of experiences. He hasn't worked since COVID. He went back to Red Robin, was not rehired, like after COVID. And we've just had a really hard time finding employment,
Yeah.
Well,
He does
hard.
sound like, though, he was very independent. And are there
Yes.
any things that you can say got him to be that level?
He went to all his IEP meetings since the age of 3.
Wow.
Self-advocating.
Yes, that's
Right?
important.
Speaking up for himself.
Yeah.
Yes.
I just want to say, sounds like you've done an amazing job.
Yeah.
Dylan, that's amazing. And, as a parent of a 19-year-old person with Downs, my son, and then Ann sitting over there with Fritz, who's 6, it's inspiring to hear
It is.
stories of people whose children are persevering and they're resilient, and he's living his life the way on his terms.
Yeah.
So I love
exactly.
that. Thank you for sharing with us. Thank you for being here. And I want to get your newsletter too, even though I won't be really.
We'll list all these
we'll put all of that
you
in the
mentioned,
comments down below. So we'll put that.
Thank
We'll
you.
put your book.
Yes.
You have a book, right?
Yes, I do. It's called The Art of Advocacy. It's a plug
Excellent.
because I wrote this 10 years ago before AI. So it really is my writing.
Okay, that's great.
Good. I love it. So Charmaine Thaner, we're going to have you
Yes,
back
we
because
will.
you have so
Thank
much
you.
information. Like you said, it's going to go, probably multi-episodes.
Next time we'll have Dylan sitting beside you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, he would love that. He's been the speaker at a lot of the conferences.
That
I
would
would
be
love
amazing.
that,
Yeah,
Okay,
that's
wonderful. Well, thank you
Thank
so
you.
much
Thank
for
you.
joining us.
Bye.
Thank
Nice
you to
to
all guests and audience with Down syndrome. 21st Perspectives. Please hit like and subscribe and tell us what other topics you'd like to hear about. But until then, we'll see you on the next one.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.